This is the theme to Baseball ShangriLA. Baseball ShangriLA. We don't have a theme song, so I'm gonna sing one
La la
for
la
ya. This is the theme to Baseball ShangriLA.
la
We
la
don't have a
la.
theme, so I'm gonna say, okay, we're gonna put an end to that. Hello, everybody. This is the inaugural episode of Baseball ShangriLA. This is a Dodgers podcast. It is our first episode, so I am joined by Amy Cuevas. She writes for the Dodgers, she covers the Dodgers, and I am the Rascuache sports journalist, Juan Ramirez. Amy, long time no see. How are you?
Good. How are you? It's been a while.
It has been a while. So, look, this is because this is the inaugural episode. We're going to spend a lot of this episode kind of introducing ourselves, letting you guys know what this show is about, what you guys are embarking on, and hopefully you will engage us and you'll continue to listen to future episodes. So there might not be a lot of Dodger baseball talk specifically on this episode. We might not get into the minutia of it just because it's the first episode. But I promise you, we know baseball and we're going to get into baseball into other episodes. We really just want to turn this episode into an introduction, so to speak, of what to expect. So, Amy, let's start with the simple thing. The name of our show. So I know some people may look at our show and go, Baseball Shangri-La. No, it is not Baseball Shangri-La. The name of our show is Baseball Shangri-La. That is how it's pronounced. Baseball Shangri-La. Amy, can you tell the people how did we come across this name?
I mean, a couple things at like the very base level, like it's like a heaven on earth. It's a place of bliss. That's what the Dodgers is to me. I'm going to speak for you for a second, Juan, and for you too. But it also has historical connections too, where Chavez Ravine, if you know the history, before Dodger Stadium was there, it used to be called the poor man's Shangri-La. So we've kind of put our own spin on it, and we hope you like it too.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because when Amy and I have worked together before, and so when we said came up with this crazy idea, let's do our own show because you know what? There's not enough podcasts and there's not enough Dodgers podcasts out there. Let's go ahead and start our own. So when we talked about doing our own show, it was like, well, what do we call it? Right. And I think obviously I think we have similar senses of humor. I think we wanted to do something funny, right? What do you remember what some of the earlier inappropriate ones were that we were like, I don't know.
I do. I don't wanna mention them just in case
Okay,
we
I
get
get
in
it. Did I
any
put you on the spot there?
uh, I'm just thinking of I mean, gosh, what did we just the tip? I mean, but I think somebody actually has that one out there, so, just the foul tip, like, there were a couple iterations.
And so because Amy is very smart and she would talk me out of it and be like, Juan, we're eventually hopefully going to be viewed as professionals, right? We don't want to go ahead and show up into, dugouts and be like, and who are you with? I'm here with Lávame los huevos, or something like that. We're the baseball ways. It's Amy was smart and said, no, we need to come up with a name that is somewhat professional, but at the same time, maybe speaks a little bit to our personalities. So I remember I did say to you, I was like, look, I want something that has to do with Chavez Ravine. Because being a Mexican American on my part, I feel it's very important that we don't lose sight of Chavez Ravine. Chavez Ravine to me is part of Dodgers history, and we're getting years and years away from it. I don't. I think it's important that we keep that history about it. So I did want the show to reflect something about Chavez Ravine, but also something. And here I am, saying I'm proud of my heritage, and I'm pronouncing it Chavez Ravine. Chavez Ravine. I'm sorry, Chavez Ravine. Before everybody on the internet starts calling me out on it.
A little code switching here and there. It's fine, you caught yourself.
Exactly. So, in particular, when Chavez Ravine was made up of three neighborhoods, there was La Loma, Palo Verde, and Bishop. So I'm thinking, was there something that we could do with those three neighborhoods? Could we, I don't know, BL, BL. I don't know, like BLV or BVL. I
We were
couldn't think of.
playing our own version of Wordle, but there were
Yeah,
a lot of vowels.
we were doing yeah a bunch of things, and we just how could we stand out? Because there's already another show called Inside the Ravine. A lot of people make references to the ravine, but again, it's like, how can we make something that would pay homage to Chavez Ravine, and but at the same time, make it be like, we are professional, we are somewhat journalists, right? You know what, I need to get past that, right? Everybody says, no, 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 no. Say what you are, Juan. I mean, I have a degree. I have a broadcast journalism degree. So I call myself the Resquatcha sports journalist. I am a journalist. So it we came along, I came across that the fact that Chavez Ravine was called the poor man's Shangri-La. So I threw it out to Amie, and Amie was down with it. And luckily it worked, and we got a great logo out of it. So that's where the name of the show comes from, and I'm very happy with it. What about you, Amie?
I love it, and I mean, especially as a Latina who grew up in this area, we didn't get as much heritage as I would like growing up. So having something like this kind of just brings me a little bit closer, even just to my culture. But even on a lighter note, that's we met and began our friendship in the press box at Chavez Ravine. So like there are so many things that are attached to this name that just it makes me really happy that this is the one that we settled on.
And we are primarily going to be talking about the Dodgers. And it's because we're both Dodger fans. And I think that's the team that we know the most of. I think we're the most knowledgeable in terms of the Dodgers. But it is called Baseball ShangriLA. So we may be talking about other teams in Major League Baseball. I don't know if it'll exclusively, primarily, probably it will be just dominated by the Dodgers. But I think it is going to lend itself for us to talk about baseball overall, right, Amy?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a challenge we've both taken on where we both have been very Dodger centric over the years and trying, especially even this offseason, I'm trying to branch out more so that I can understand more of these players that not only we may be bringing into our team, but like who's going where. And, some of these names, because I haven't paid as much attention unless we play those teams, they're a little bit more foreign to me. So I know for me, I want to have that as a challenge to broaden my baseball horizons beyond just the Dodgers.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember as a kid, I was much more aware of the national baseball scene. Like, I knew a lot more about other teams. And as I got older, and I think Major League Baseball did the same thing. It just narrowed very much to becoming a regional sport. And so after a while, all I did was just follow the Dodgers. You know what? I think it happened. It happened once I was able to see every Dodger game. When I was a kid, you would only be able to see the Dodgers when they played on the road. And that was when they would put baseball games, believe it or not, on free television. You would be able to see baseball games on your local TV stations. So I think once I was able to see Dodger home games too, it just became Dodgers, Dodgers all the time. And I started to lose that knowledge that I had of other teams. So, like you, Amie, I would like to be better about that. I want to make sure that I follow other teams, and also the fact that the sport, and we've seen it by the Dodgers offseason, the sport has become international. So I think now it's going to be important for us to follow those other leagues around the world, the KBO, the Japanese baseball league, the Mexican league, because we're seeing all these players now coming from those leagues and being very productive players in Major League Baseball.
I had a similar yet different experience because growing up, I would go to Dodger games with my dad. I mean, not many. I was a kid, probably not as focused on the game as I could be. But in my early 20s, I moved to Northern California, and back then, you either had to have cable to watch games, or you went out and somebody had to broadcast that game. Uh, Living on my own, I didn't have money for cable, so I lost baseball for a long time until streaming came along, and then it was like, oh wow, I can actually take advantage at a reasonable rate to be able to watch the team that I used to love. And so it's only been in the last 10 years or so that I was able to get back to the Dodgers before I moved back down here because they're not going to play Dodgers games unless the Giants were playing them in Northern California. So
Yeah.
just having access is a big thing.
as Amy had mentioned, we first met in the press box at Dodger Stadium. And I have to say this. So it was my first day covering the team, and I had never been in the press box. I hadn't been in the clubhouse. I didn't know where to go. And so the thing is you have all these reporters there, and nobody was offering to help the new kid. No, everybody was looking at me like, "Who the fuck are you lost, buddy? Like who the fuck are you?" Right? And Amy was gracious enough. She was the only one that showed any real kindness to me and took me under my wing and said, "Follow me, kid. I'll tell you, I'll point you where you need to go. I'll tell you what you can and can't do. I'll, look professional somewhere because you're doing a job." So I want to thank Amy for doing that. And it was the beginning of a beautiful relationship because as we sat next to each other in the press box watching the game, I soon realized that Amy has a wonderful sense of humor because she gets all my jokes and she gets a lot of my references. I do forgive her that she is a fan of the lesser sequels in the Jaws series, but hey, nobody's perfect, right, Amy?
Oh my god, I love me some Jaws 3 and Jaws: The Revenge, man. It has its place, but nothing will supersede Jaws 1.
I mean, what was your? I'm just curious. So, as I have a degree in broadcast journalism, right? And like everything in life, I had one idea when I went to college. This is what I'm going to do, and then all of a sudden, I get into the real world, and I get caught in real life. I have a 9 to 5 job and it pays me well. And all of a sudden, I don't want to chase my dreams anymore because I like my reality. I like having health insurance. I like being able to pay my rent. So when I got the opportunity to actually cover the Dodgers, I had to remind myself going, "Hey man, I went to school for this. I have training. I can do this. I'm a journalist." Amy, did you have any similar like how did you actually get to become credentialed and be at Dodger Stadium, be in the clubhouse, interviewing players and interacting with the organization?
My story is actually the opposite of yours. I don't have a degree in journalism. I was dragged kicking and screaming onto Twitter, now X, by one of my best friends during the pandemic, and I think because we're all dying for baseball, I probably interacted with people a little bit more than I would have, and somebody who wrote for a blog had their own asked me to come write for them because I knew how to talk about baseball. So started writing for a baseball blog, and the rest is history. Got credentialed, ended up in that press box probably just a couple months before you showed up there, and then you ended up being my buddy when we'd go down to the clubhouse. So it all worked out.
What was your biggest surprise once you were doing covering the team? Like, what was something that you never expected, or what was something maybe you thought, "Oh, I don't know if I like this."
Oh, honestly, it's still surreal even a couple years later for me. Like I feel like every time I step foot in that press box, I am the luckiest person in the world. Like I am not only getting to write, which I love, but I'm covering the team that, it fills so much of my time. So I don't know that there's necessarily anything that surprised me because I'm still stuck in that awe stage of like I get to be here. I get to be part of this media scrum and listen to, Dave Roberts talk about the players or what's going to happen in this game, and we get to go downstairs after the game and talk to players and hear their summary of the game, how they feel like they did, and then go listen to Dave Roberts again. Like to me it's just, how is this my life? Like how did this happen? And I love this team so much. So I still haven't really had that moment of like, huh, yet, because I'm still in that awe phase.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, right? That you sit there. There are moments where you remind yourself, like, "Am I really doing this?" Like you take it for granted. I think sometimes. And look, when on this upcoming season, this is the coverage that we're going to give you guys. Like, we are going to be at the stadium. We're going to be talking to Dave Roberts. We're going to be talking to the players, post game interviews, pre game interviews. So, a lot of our opinions, we're going to try to relay to you guys as much information as we can. And I think it's important that we're there, that because there's stuff that you can see at the stadium that you don't see on TV. So, that's where a lot of these takes are going to come from. So let's get into this, Amy. Like, what were your visions about doing a show? Because look, the truth of the matter is there's a lot of Dodger podcasts out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and a lot of them say a lot of the same thing. A lot of them have different opinions, but there is a lot. It's a saturated market. What was your intention with doing your own show?
For me, I think a lot of it just comes down to like representation matters. We're all going to be doing, like you said, the same thing. We're all getting the same news. It's who do you resonate with? There are certain podcasts that I listen to because I resonate with the people that are talking. They're not covering anything any differently than anybody else, but I just resonate with how they present that message. There's other shows that I just won't listen to because it doesn't click for me. So hopefully the people that we do click with, you guys find us and we're able to deliver news to you that maybe you can't catch up on during the week or you're too busy and we can just give you those little snippets. But for me, it just I would like to see more like I'm a Latina, I'm a woman in baseball. There's not a lot of women for me to follow. So having somebody that I could listen to, I could keep waiting for that, or we could just start a podcast and, I get to talk to my friend who I respect, who's also a huge baseball fan, who's also credentialed, and we can have these conversations and hopefully share that Dodgers news with other people.
You mentioned something that I think at least we take for granted because I grew up watching baseball games and on TV, and it's always men. There was Vin Scully, and if it wasn't Vin Scully, if I was listening to it on the radio, I would listen to Jaime Jarrín. So it was always easy for me to. I never once didn't get the idea that that's not something I could do because I saw, men doing this kind of stuff. So are there any women in the game that inspired you, that made you realize, hey, this is something that I can do?
Honestly, Alana Rizzo was probably the first person that I saw where it was just, especially in baseball, for me being a Dodger fan, seeing her do that, be as knowledgeable as she was, not just, I feel like sometimes you have like a person on the side and they'll do those interviews, but the content just isn't there. And she brought all of that baseball content, the facts, the knowledge, and then now she's been followed by Kirsten Watson, and those two women just, I didn't think it was possible for somebody like me because I'd never seen it. And it sounds so silly, like, well, of course you could do it. But sometimes it really does matter seeing someone else like you being able to do something like that, to for your brain to just unlock like, well, yeah, I could do that too. And so those two women are probably big influences on me being able to do this and even just find my voice.
Now, I don't know if you want to go into this. So if you don't want to go into this, just tell me to shut up and we'll go into the next question. Um, but you have mentioned that you've brought this up to me many times in the sense that being that you're a woman, that you feel like you have to not necessarily work twice as hard. I don't know. I don't want to put the wrong words in your mouth, but it seems like the level of criticism for maybe something that you might say or that you might report is a little greater than if I said it. I know recently you've become a star on X for your certain opinions on a certain star player, and if you look at it, you know, there's a lot of people I know that say social media is just rough. It is the worst of people. It is, you just get garbage people, but a lot of the times you don't even know who's saying it. It might be a robot or something like that. But in terms of dealing with kind of criticism that in some cases may be unwarranted, I mean, how hard is it really to deal with that?
Even before I got into the journalism side of things, there was always gatekeeping into the sport. So there's good and bad, right? I love that baseball is its own language. Like if you connect with somebody, and I feel like for in my experience, it's been a little bit harder because I could be sitting at a sports bar, maybe I'm reading a book or I'm working on some research and I can hear, guys chatting about the game and I want to join into the game or the conversation, but I'm not necessarily thought of as somebody to be included in that unless I insert myself into that conversation. But there's been a lot of instances where I've been chided as a fan and, talk to any female fan and it is the gatekeeping of, okay, well, name five players, prove that you're a fan. Like, why do I have to prove that I'm a fan? Like, do you? have to prove that you're a fan. So taking that mentality as a fan into the journalism, I double, triple check my work, triple check the stats, make sure that, I'm looking up at least 2 or 3 sources, which is just good research anyway, but making sure that there's no way you can find fault with my stats so that, oh, you're just a woman. This is why we don't let women in the sport. Because I don't think it has anything to do with being a woman. It's just being a knowledgeable human. And I think we need to get to that level.
You brought up Kirsten Watson, and I had a very brief conversation with her about this. Um, for her first year, now it is. I mean, she had a tough because she was following. You mentioned Alana Rizzo. Alana Rizzo is very polished. She's very good at what she does, and she makes it look easy. So those were tough shoes to fill. And Kirsten comes in, and I remember talking to her because I feel like that first year for her was very rough in terms of how people treated her, especially on social media, the comments that people made. But I remember talking to her in the dugout, and she acknowledged that it was tough. She knew, like, not only was she being compared to Alana, whether it was fair or unfair, it is part of the business, but she also knew, she would tell me players would test her, like, test her knowledge to be like, how do you know about how much do you really know about baseball? And that's just got to be tough because it's hard enough to do the job, but these guys who you're supposed to be having a working relationship with, the guys that you depend on information, and they're testing you, like they're trying to maybe see. I don't know. I don't think it's fair to say they're setting you up for failure, but they wouldn't be opposed if you did fall flat on your face, or is that the wrong way of looking at it?
And that's what it feels like sometimes. And again, in my experience, like there's a time and a place I think in baseball for like stats and then opinion. And a lot of her job does require research. It does require her to have that working relationship with the players. But anybody who's, testing your knowledge to make sure that you can talk about, like, why can't we just have a conversation? Like, if I don't know what I'm talking about, why can't we, maybe you can teach me something. Maybe you're gonna show me something that I didn't know, and now I can carry that forward. Because I don't know. Do you have that experience male to male with fans? Like, do you guys ever do that outside of like kind of normal ribbing or
Yeah, I think it is one of those things where it is maybe considered ribbing. Like, usually, if you have a take and people don't agree with it, they'll sit there and they'll tell you, you don't know what you're talking about. But there are times where, like, I'll read up to people because one of those things, like when you meet a total stranger, what is the easiest thing to do to be able to strike up a conversation? At least for me, my go to are sports and movies. Now, if there's dudes who aren't really into sports, then okay, I'll go to the movie card, right? But there's times where people will say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Dodger fan," and then you start talking to them and been like, "Bro, you're not a Dodger fan. You may be a casual, but you're not someone that I may be able to engage." And that's what cracks me up about you. Even when we're not in the press box, like when we're in at Dodger Stadium in the seats, and you start talking, and maybe I'm guilty of this too because I'm surprised at the way you talk about me. Like when you tell me a certain player sucks, because I'm so used to you being so objective and you are also just very positive. You're much more positive than I am. But when I hear you sit there and go, this guy sucks, why do they keep putting him out there? It is one of those things where you're not wrong. Like, you know what you're talking about, and it is one of those things that's unfair, right? That you assume, that's the kind of relationship that I would have with my boy. I wouldn't expect, and you're right. It's like, why would it? Why? Because you're a woman. You're not. There are so many knowledgeable Dodger female fans out there that will tell you everything. And I hope they listen to the show. I hope now, because they see we have a female perspective on this show, that it'll give them reason to listen to our show.
especially when we do like down the line when we do lives and we engage with people, like that's we want to engage with all people. Not, there's not a preference there, and we want to hear your opinions and your takes, because I think that's what makes this game beautiful. It's we're not spouting off things and it's like, well, I'm right and you're wrong. We could both have a totally different view on something, and that's what's great about this game. That's what makes it unique. It's such a unifier, and it brings us all together. Like, it doesn't matter what you believe in politically, religiously, where you work, how much money you make. When we're all in that stadium together, we are rooting for our team. And so I think that that's something that we should take advantage of instead of letting it tear us apart. And so I hope I hope the people who resonate with us find us, and we can have those conversations with them.
It's interesting because we joke around that there's so many Dodger podcasts, and it's just like another Dodger podcast. Like, what gives you guys? Why are you guys the authority? Why should I listen? Why should I watch your guys' show? What what kind of information are you going to give me that don't already know? And I want to get your opinion on this, Amie, because this is fairly recent that this happened. Sports Illustrated recently just basically got rid of all their staff, right? And then the LA Times went through a major layoff. They over 100 employees, and one of those people that got laid off was the beat writer of the Los Angeles Dodgers, Jack Harris, a guy that you and I both know. I mean, we've worked alongside him, and I don't think anybody has a bad thing to say about Jack Harris. They were very complimentary. So it does concern me, the state of journalism, not just in sports, but in all in this country, because journalism is the fourth estate. Right, we need them to keep these institutions. They're the checks and balances, right? So one of these things is like, well, the Dodgers don't need a beat writer because the LA Times has they have at least, I mean, they got columnists, they got Bill Plaschke, they got Jorge Castillo, they got Dylan Hernandez, they got Bill Shaken, Mike DiGiovanna. There have been times we've been in the press box where the LA Times has had like 5 or 6 people there covering a game. And it's like, do you really need this many people? And I think what's going to happen is like what happens whenever there's a layoff is the people that are left over, they're going to have to pick up the slack. They're going to have to do the extra work. But it is important, I think, to have because like when stuff happens off the field, like when the Julio Urias stuff happened, the information we were getting was from Jack Harris, from Bill Shaken, from people in the LA Times. If we don't have those reporters, that story probably goes unreported. And we don't and I know there's a lot of people that are just like, don't make me decide. Don't bring real life into sports. I just want to watch sports. I don't want to know that this guy beats his wife or that he does these horrible things in his own private life. But it's public information and we need to know. So the reason why I bring this up is at least with our show, what we're going to try to do because we are credentialed and we're going to be covering the team is we're going to bring you the information that we get and we're going to call it the way it is. We're not going to try to soft soap things. We're not going to sit here and just we only talk good things about the Dodgers. We're not going to. I think there's going to be times where we are going to be critical. I think I, I'm going to speak for myself because I don't want to speak for you. I'm going to let you talk, but I think we have to be honest with you guys. And if things are not going well, or if the Dodgers, the organization, has done something wrong, it is our obligation to talk honestly about them. Amie, what's your stand there?
I agree. I think for me, I think there's a separation too, because I think you brought up a few moments ago, like, oh, that player sucks. Well, okay, but why do they suck? I think the why is important. Um, and I think also just being able to separate whatever is happening, it's not necessarily there are certain players that you'll hear people talk about, maybe their at bats have not been great or whatever, but that doesn't mean that that person is horrible. But the stats back up, and so when those things happen, it is a little bit, especially for me, it's a little bit harder to talk about because there's a humanity side of the game, and I try to balance that out. But I think you're right. We do need to be able to speak both sides of it. Um, like you mentioned, even just the front row, sometimes the LA Times had a lot of representation, but even to your point about the podcasts, there are a lot of podcasts out there. There were a lot of people from the LA Times, but each one had a different voice. And somebody might not be reading each one of those person's columns, but I might pick that one that resonates with me, and that's what I'm going to read. And so I think all of those things are important. having the different voices out there, making sure that we're presenting truth, and sometimes bringing some of those hard stories.
And, because of the fact that the paper of record in this city, in Los Angeles, has laid off all these people. Like, I feel really bad. The Los Angeles Times just recently started a section called De Los, which was supposed to, focus on the Latino community. And they absolutely gutted the staff of that. So, I mean, this is why I feel sometimes it's a little disingenuous when they sit there and they say, "Hey, look, we're here. We represent your people. Look what we're doing." And then you go and you lay them off. And it was like, well, why did you do this? Why did you go through all this dog and pony show to tell us that you care about a community, and then you got completely you got rid of them? This is a long way of basically saying that maybe the reason why there are so many podcasts and there is the rise of independent media, and independent media needs to rise because our papers are failing us in terms of being organizations that are looking to work for profit. And anybody that buys a newspaper to try to make money, I'm just like, look, I don't even have any money. I'm poor. And I can tell you, I'm not going to make any money owning a newspaper. You do it because it's a service to your community, right? And I've always said this. I supported all the journalists that walked out, and it was just like, please put community before profit. It didn't happen that way, but because of that, shows like ourselves, the independent media, so to speak, now I think we have a greater responsibility to report stuff that maybe is not being reported on. And this is where hopefully we earn your guys' trust, that the more you listen to our show, the more you realize that we're not just making shit up, we're not being controversial for the sake of being controversial. Our takes are our takes, they're our own because we believe them. And I mean, do you feel differently, Amy?
Yeah, and also Jaws 3 was a reasonable film. It was good.
She said
But
what she said, everybody. She said what she said.
but yeah, but I think it's also important to remember, while we will be do our best to be truthful, these are still opinions. So, we're going to be as objective as we can. We're going to I want to bring information like what I would want to hear, what I would want to get from somebody. If I don't have time to watch the news, or maybe the news is a bit of a downer, I want to have a resource to listen and go get that information. That's what I would like to provide here to the best of my ability, but also remembering that these are opinions. We're not always going to agree with each other, or, with whoever's listening to us. And, I think there's still respectful ways to go about that.
I want to wrap up this episode with this question, and that is, we're both fans of the Dodgers. We grew up being Dodger fans, and now we have the ability to cover the team. And I know at least objectivity to me is important in, calling it for what it is and not trying to play favorites. You're a season ticket holder. How hard is it for you to balance that being a fan? I, it- I all right, I'm not going to say what I want to say because I know you're just going to bite my head off. But there was a time, and I'm not going to say the person's name, but I saw Amy almost fangirl because there was a certain former player in the press box, and I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not unless you want to share the details. I'll leave it up to you. But it was just so funny to see her because I knew what was happening, right? So I totally enjoy being able to torture her because she knew that I knew what was happening, right? And she's looking at me like, don't you dare embarrass me. Don't embarrass me here. Let me have my moment. But it was one of those things where you became human, but not once did I ever doubt that you were still going to report stories with objectivity. Do you want to share any of that, or do you?
I'll share pieces, but the that's our story.
Okay,
um no, I mean, I'm happy to share it at some point. It's just it is hard being in the press box. I try to be as professional as possible when we're in there, because it's a privilege. And I want to be worthy of the right to be in there. I think in that moment when that happened, it was more of a, oh my gosh, they're coming into this part of the press box. And luckily, you had been blocking that person from our view. So I had a split second of just pure fangirl before I had to shut it down and be professional. And it was really hard. Um, that being said, though, I think there's a time and place for all of it, and, I think it's a good reminder to be human too, because I know just kinda going back to the conversation we were talking about earlier, being a woman in sports, I feel like I have to bring that professionalism, and sometimes I lose sight of having fun and being a fan, and that this is a game, and trying to find that balance. So I'm hoping we can strike a little bit of a balance here, and you can remind me to be human while we're doing this too.
Look, I appreciate that human aspect of yours because I had that same moment, and I'm not afraid to say it. When I met Jaime Jarrin, I was just like, I mean, that guy played such a huge role in my childhood. And there's a picture that I have from him from FanFest when we were in the bullpen. You were with me.
Yeah.
We were in the bullpen interviewing players, and Jaime Jarrin showed up. And it's a picture that I will, cherish for the rest of my life. The way he put his arm around me, like he knew me, was just something like the fangirl in me was going crazy. But I had to remind myself that I'm here to do a job, and I'm here to ask questions that we need to go ahead and get answers to. I know, like, there's no cheering in the press box. I'm not going to go into that story, but there is no cheering in the press box. We need to be professional.
But
So
I think those are some of the things that people don't realize, that those are some of the rules, though. Like, you don't really think about it unless I didn't realize that until we got into the press box, and it was like unbiased, no cheering. Those are things that you find out kind of as you go, where it's like, you're a fan, how do you not cheer? It's really hard.
well, yeah, and then the thing is that what I think is really great about what you say, the human aspect of it, is you kind of lose. I was there last year when Noah Syndergaard had the saddest Christmas ever. I was literally right in front of him at the clubhouse, and I mean, look, guys, Noah Syndergaard, there's a reason why his nickname is Thor, and it's not because of the hair. This dude is just a massive guy. It's just like 7 foot, just muscle, all muscle. And to hear him talk so dejected, and how basically he blamed the loss on himself, that he lets the whole team down. When someone's right in front of you and they're just basically going to the darkest part in their soul, you kind of have to sit there and it does run by you and go, dude, I don't care about baseball, man. I wanted to be like, do you want a hug? Do you like need a hug? So I think it is important to not lose sight of that human aspect when we're reporting, when we're covering a team. So I'm sure we're going to get caught up into it, and there will be moments where we'll sit there and we'll say this team sucks, this guy sucks. But this is not, if that's what you're expecting with this show, you're not going to get a lot of that here, because again, we are going to try. We make a concerted effort to try to look at the other side of things and not necessarily point the obvious. Um, we're gonna wrap things up. Amie, any closing words for you on our inaugural episode? Like the fact that we actually did this, we actually recorded it.
We did it. Oh my gosh. I guess the only thing I would say, kind of just riding the coattails of your story, is just the humanity of the game is so important to me. Like, the fact that we get to do this, like you said, we just did our first podcast episode. Like, I love talking baseball. I love watching baseball. Like, I light up. I don't know how it is for other fans, but like, this is what makes me feel alive. I hope we can bring that to you, but I think that's something to the humanity of it as well. I've been in the clubhouse with Juan. We're all doing our standard like interview. The main beat writers are asking questions of these players in the best and the worst moments. And everybody kind of trails away to go to another player, and Juan asks a question and gets Bobby Miller to laugh. Like, those are the moments, like those are those like just perfect baseball moments, on top of all of the other just information that we're gathering along the way. So I would say, for me, one of the other important things is just the humanity of the game, remembering that these guys are human. They're playing over 162 plus games a year, plus if you're lucky. Like, they're on the stage essentially performing for us, and I think we need to respect that, especially when we're talking about them, when we're talking about like, "Oh, they suck," or this, or you know what, their stats may suck, that performance may suck, but you know what? These guys are doing something amazing, and I know I couldn't do it. I probably couldn't run down the block right now. So, just kind of remembering that humanity as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is super important. Again, I promise you guys, we are going to be talking about Dodger baseball. It's going to be, we're actually going to be talking about games. We're going to be talking about players. We wanted to take this time, this episode, to introduce ourselves, to kind of let you guys know what to expect. So, just to recap, I mean, I think you're going to expect honesty. As Amy says to me all the time, do you even like baseball, bro? Yes, I am guilty of being negative. I tend to be a little bit negative. Amy balances me out. So you're gonna get a little yin and yang on this show. But we're gonna strive for honesty. We're gonna try to call it what it is. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of times that you and I are not going to agree on stuff, and there's gonna be some banter going back and forth. But really, we're going to try, this show's going to grow along with hopefully our audience, guys. This is just our first episode. I think we're just trying to find ourselves and see what this show is going to be about. But I want to thank all of you who come across this show, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening to it on the podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on our socials. I'm so bad that I don't even know what our handles are on. I'm going to go to you, Amy. Please bail me out here.
I do. I think I have them. I think Instagram, and Twitch, and I'm trying to think of what the other one. They're all at Baseball ShangriLA. And then I believe Twitter. We'll get this and we'll get you guys the updated information. But it's at BB ShangriLA. So
That one I know for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
the Twitter or X is BB Shangra LA. Um,
hmm Instagram, Threads, and Twitch are all at Baseball ShangriLA. One word, no spaces. Yeah.
So hopefully you got to know a little bit about at least as much as we wanted to reveal, because the next episodes they're all going to be baseball, guys. So if you made it all the way through this episode, okay, that was our therapy episode. Now it's all baseball all the time coming up. We want to thank you again. We appreciate your support. She is Amy Cuevas and I am Juan Ramirez, and you have been watching, listening to Baseball Shangri LA. See you next
Woo.
time.